Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, March the 20th, 2025. And today it is the equinox, when the sun changes sign. And in the northern hemisphere, it is indeed the spring equinox. I'm not sure if in the southern hemisphere you describe it as a spring equinox because it is the beginning of the autumn. But I think you know what I mean. I don't want to give the implication that I have a northern hemisphere bias. So I will be looking at the equinox in detail later in this video. I'll be considering, what it means, what kind of impact we might expect. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, March the 20th, 2025. As always, my reminder that if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be massively grateful if you were to add yourself as a subscriber, because it does make a difference to the channel. So anyway, let's look at what's happening today. So here is a chart for today at noon, Thursday, March 20th, 2025, noon New York time. And you can see that the moon is now in Sagittarius, 9 degrees 51 Sagittarius, New York time at noon. And the moon is making a trine to Venus. It's making a trine to Mercury. And so, that is quite optimistic. The moon now in a fire sign, making those trines. It feels that things are happening. There's more action in the world. And also, look at the sun. The sun is now in Aries. In fact, the sun went into Aries at 9:01 a.m. London time. So that means it went into Aries at 2:01 a.m. in California. I think that's 5:01 a.m. in New York. And it goes into Aries at 10:01 a.m. in Paris. And then as far as Australia is concerned, the sun won't go into Aries until 1 minute past 10 in the evening in Sydney, Australia. And if you're in New Zealand, well, actually the equinox isn't till just after midnight on Friday. I think it's at 1 minute past midnight. But it's interesting that we've got both the sun and the moon changing sign, moving out of water signs, moving into fire signs. So that really does make a big difference. It does really make things feel more alive. And there just is more action, more energy. And indeed, what's really happening is that the Aries season has well and truly begun, although we already have Mercury and Venus in Aries. They're not going to stay in Aries for much longer. Mercury and Venus will actually leave Aries and go back into Pisces quite shortly. But, for the moment, the emphasis is very much on Aries, and that's very assertive. We want to get things done, and many of us might feel that it is a new beginning. And as far as those lunar aspects are concerned, we do have a Mars-Jupiter decile. So so there's Mars, there's Jupiter. You can see that Mars and Jupiter are 36 degrees apart, 36 degrees, 1/10 of a circle. And, that Mars-Jupiter decile, it kind of supports everything else I've been saying, about all this fire. Mars and Jupiter is about action. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to try to achieve. And with that Mars-Jupiter decile, we might have an idea about what might be possible if we had the chance. To begin with, it might be a fantasy, or we might just consider what might be possible if everything went our way. And Indeed, it is possible. So if you want to create a real splash, you want to make people sit up and listen, and you have sufficient willpower, you can. But, with Mars and Jupiter, you always have to be careful that you don't overdo it. So that's the position in New York. Let's look at it from the viewpoint of Sydney, Australia. Even in Sydney, Australia, at noon, the moon is still in Sagittarius. So really, wherever you are, you can regard the moon as being in this sign. Okay, in Australia or New Zealand, if you're up early this morning, there may be a sort of late Scorpio feeling, but it's not going to last long. So I don't think there's a great deal of difference between Australia, New Zealand and the Americas, though the equinox will happen later in Australasia. The equinox is right at the end of the day, and if you're in New Zealand, it's actually slightly into tomorrow. As far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, so here it is. There is the heliocentric. Where has it gone? Here it is. And so heliocentrically, we now see that the Earth is just gone into Libra. So in the heliocentric chart, the Earth is always opposition the Sun. So the Sun moves into Aries, and you look at it from a different perspective, and Earth moves into Libra. And as the Earth moves into Libra, it starts making a trine to Pluto, in the same way that when the Sun moves into Aries, it starts making a sextile to Pluto. So in a way, it's not telling us anything we don't already know. And aside from that, we have still got Venus opposition Neptune. The Earth is still opposition Neptune, not as closely as it was yesterday, but still there. It's not going away. A lot of the confusion and chaos of that Sun conjunct Neptune and deception. I think there is deception, and people don't really know what's going on. Big things are happening in the world, but the question is, how do we interpret them? It's often not very easy. Now, one thing we should perhaps note is that Mars is starting to move towards a sextile of Jupiter. So over the next couple of days, that sextile is going to increase in potency. And, we've just discussed Mars-Jupiter in terms of that decile. And Mars-Jupiter is about energy, action, wanting things to happen. And Mars sextile Jupiter may just increase the pace of things. It could be a little bit aggressive. We shouldn't be too optimistic about Mars-Jupiter. Mars-Jupiter as a pair can be difficult. There can be a temptation to overdo it with Mars sextile Jupiter. So that's certainly something you need to watch out for. And also we've just had Mars trine Chiron. So there's a sort of Mars Chiron Jupiter feel. Some of us might feel that we really want to stand out. Mars having made the trine to Chiron. This is heliocentrically, of course. Mars having made the trine to Chiron, making the sextile to Jupiter. And in fact, the Mars, just after it makes a sextile to Jupiter, it makes a square to Uranus. So heliocentric Mars square Uranus could be action-packed, to say the least. And it could just relate to sudden events that we weren't expecting, possibly of a global nature, but we don't need to worry about that quite yet. So that's a heliocentric picture. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, March 20th, 2025. Aries. It's finally happened. The sun is in your sign. It is the day of the spring equinox, at least from a northern hemisphere perspective. So things are happening, and it really feels like It's a new dawn, maybe. Not just because the sun has gone into Aries, but the moon is now in Sagittarius. So Aries, you might feel very motivated. You no longer have to hide things, and you can be sort of fairly honest about the way you feel. Though I should make the point that for some time Mars has been moving through Cancer, and that might mitigate Sun in Aries ever so slightly, because with Mars moving through Cancer, and I understand Mars has been moving through Cancer for a long time, but I think it doesn't actually leave Cancer until next month. But with Mars moving through Cancer, there's still a certain hesitancy there. You do value your security. You regard fundamental stability as being important. But nonetheless, the sun does move into Aries, and that maybe provides a contrast. You understand also that things need to be done, and you want action, and you've perhaps been waiting for this moment for some time. You've been waiting for the Aries season to start. Things have been delayed, and now you don't want to hold back. And the moon, when it's in Sagittarius, does make trines to Venus and Mercury. So that means, Aries, that you do have a lot to say for yourself. You want to talk about your ideas, your plans. If you're in a northern hemisphere, it's a spring, and with the spring comes new possibilities. And yeah, in general, you don't want to hold back. And additionally, you're not quite satisfied with the way things are. Things could always be better, and you're on the lookout for excitement. Not necessarily excitement in any mindless way. Excitement is about stimulation. It's about seeing and experiencing things that you perhaps haven't experienced before. You know they exist, and you want to be a part of it all. And so if there's an opportunity to do something differently, then I think that's an opportunity you're very much going to want to take. And I think that would be the right approach. Obviously, I'm not advocating that you take risks or that you move into dangerous and unexplored territory. I mean, it can be unexplored territory, but there's no need to take risks or to be too impulsive. And I don't think you actually need to be impulsive. There's no need for exaggeration, because things are more natural now. The world around you is more tolerant of who you are. Still, there is this Mars-Jupiter decile, and that Mars-Jupiter decile does indicate to me that at a really quite fundamental level, you want action, and you want things to be more than they already are. And so you have an idea about what you can do. So think about that idea. Is it dangerous? Are you prepared to deal with its consequences? Now, if you are prepared to deal with its consequences, and it's not dangerous, at least not dangerous in a, for example, physical or financial sense, if it's not dangerous, then probably you should just go for it, and don't forget what makes you special. And it does seem at the moment that some Arians are able to demonstrate some of their talents, maybe some of their artistic talents. Even if in itself it's not artistic, you can do things in a kind of a beautiful way that people appreciate. And additionally, you continue to be quite charismatic. You have been quite charismatic over the last few days, and this charisma continues, and I think it intensifies now, because now that the moon is in Sagittarius and the sun is moving into Aries, that does mean that there's something about you But it's not just appealing, but it's also exciting. And so, don't hold back. That gives you further opportunities to get people onto your side and to win their friendship. And also with the moon making trines to Venus and Mercury, it seems very likely that relationships at all levels should prosper, because in a way you're the person of the moment. So do make the most of the opportunity. Taurus, it's a bit of a changeover time, with the equinox, with the sun moving into Aries, and the sun moving into Aries. It is a time of optimism. It's certainly in the northern hemisphere. It's the beginning of spring, and you're reminded that soon enough the sun will move into Taurus. But that's not for another month, and your first impulse with the sun moving into Aries and the moon moving into Sagittarius might be to question what you're doing. Other people might be impulsive and they might be on the lookout for excitement, but you, I don't think so, not necessarily. You might regard the whole thing as just being a little too much effort, too much work, just too much to have to deal with, and things might seem to be just a little bit unstable, but I wouldn't worry about it. There's no need to be right at the center of things. You can still have an influence, and that moon trine Venus, moon trine Venus is one of the aspects going on today, is going to be helpful. It does allow you to project yourself, and people will understand what you're about, and it will be very clear that you have something to offer. And I don't think you have to advertise it. People just know, and if there's something they want, something they need, they'll be able to come to you. You, I think, can provide it, and in a process, it should work your way. It's not like you're giving something away and getting nothing in return. Yeah, sure, you are appreciated, no doubt about that. And also, if you get the chance, you're able to communicate freely, but in your own way. It's not like you're a loudmouth today. You're not. But if you have the right meeting, the right opportunity, you can say what's on your mind just very easily, and you will be able to articulate what is important to you, and people will get it. So Taurus, you might say that today you actually have quite a lot of freedom because there isn't so much pressure. There is pressure, but I don't think it's the kind of pressure that you necessarily have to deal with. Now, you might feel that you should do something. If you remember from the sort of heliocentric chart, we had heliocentrically, we've got Venus square Jupiter, and that might encourage you to push things further than you have to try too hard, but you don't have to try too hard. Let other people make the effort. And also Taurus, you've got things to work out in your own way, and you're probably more perceptive than usual, and you can really just enjoy the sun moving into Aries. Though I have to say one thing, and this is perhaps a good reason why you do need to start to consider having a lower profile, is that the position of Venus is your ruler, of course. The position of Venus, which is Venus, is starting to weaken. And that is perhaps one of the problems of the sun moving out of Pisces and into Aries, because because Venus is now combust, and that conjunction to the Sun can really be undermining. And remember, Venus is retrograde, and Venus is in a sign of its detriment. And so, over the next week, maybe, you don't want to take on too much. You have to understand your limits. It's easy to be overwhelmed. And so if you're planning the next week, I'll go into this Sun-Venus conjunction coming up in detail in a few days' time, but you don't want to take on too much, and you need to be aware of your weaknesses. And if you're aware of your weaknesses, then you can start to arrange things. You just that way you can avoid things that might be just too much for you. And perhaps, Taurus, it is a time for taking a lower profile. Again, not just today, but over the short term, maybe the next week or two. Gemini, we have some action. The Sun is moving into Aries. It's the equinox, and we also have the Moon moving into Sagittarius. So, all of a sudden we've got a lot of fire. And if you're a Gemini, I think that's a good thing. Geminis need fire. Gemini is an air sign, and Geminis can be very good at thinking things through. But sometimes, ideas can have their limits. Ideas are just not enough. It's fun having ideas, but if you can't act on these ideas, it all becomes a bit stale and boring, and Geminis can just be accused of talking too much. It's just all empty words. And now, with the Moon moving into Sagittarius and Sun moving into Aries, there's a spark, and that spark had been missing for a long time, but now it's there, and it's possible that you find a way, or you come across a way to put theory into practice, and that may be through other people, maybe people who have their suns or their ascendants, particularly their suns, in fire signs. Or maybe their moon's in fire signs. You need fiery people. Fiery people can benefit you. So if you've got Aries or Sagittarius or even Leo friends, then maybe you should spend time with them, because they'll give you the inspiration you're looking for. And with the Sun moving into Aries, I think that your social life should pick up, and also the Moon moving into Sagittarius, making a trine to Venus and making a trine to Mercury, your ruler, that does make things more interesting on an interpersonal level. Other people are there. They can provide you with excitement. It's probably not a good time, Gemini. It's not a good time, Gemini, to be on your own. You could be on your own. You might be happy on your own, but the trouble about being on your own is that you might feel that you're missing out on some important opportunities, or at least some fun opportunities. So try to have as active a day as possible, and also with close relationships can be very productive. So do pay attention to the people close to you. And also, it may be a time for developing new relationships, because you just have a natural spontaneity, and even if you don't have complete spontaneity, then another person can provide you with what you're looking for. And so really, Gemini, try not to spend the day alone if you can possibly help it. But even if you are on your own, with the Moon in Sagittarius, Sun in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Moon making a trine to Aries, there is some excitement going on. There is some spark, and there is some inspiration. So really do try to make the most of it. But One other thing, Gemini, which is slightly different, maybe completely different, is that when you want to be today, you can actually come over as being an authority. There are just things you know about, and once you're on the right subject, your subject, the subject you have expertise about, you can't be stopped, and your pronouncements are going to be absolutely irrefutable, almost. And so once you hit that moment, if you hit that moment when you're dealing with something you're absolutely 100% sure about, don't be afraid of being an authority. Don't be afraid of feeling that you're being I won't say patronizing, but a little bit patronizing, because you may be dealing with people that don't know much about a subject, but you are the expert. So try to steer things onto your particular area of expertise, because once you're there, people will really listen to you, and they will certainly respect you. Cancer, it is the equinox, and the equinox is important. The equinoxes and the solstices very often are important for your sign, and we now have 3 planets in a cardinal sign, and Cancer is of course a cardinal sign, and this is a time, Cancer, to be taking yourself seriously. In many ways, Cancer, this is a time of year when you actually are quite powerful. And if you think about it, Aries is at the top of your chart. In 3 months' time, the sun will move into your sign. But now it's moving into another cardinal sign, Aries, and the sun, when it moves into Aries, straight away is exalted, and this allows you to be very responsible, to take your position in society. You need to be listened to, and you have things to say, and with the sun moving into Aries, you can adopt a position of leadership. And that might not be something you want to do. It all seems rather too much, but it is a time. I mean, if you have any opportunity, you must do it. And it may not just be about opportunity, it's about responsibility. Because you can see things that other people can't see, and you actually have the intuition as well as the emotion. Emotion is just about feeling things, which Cancerians can be very good at, but with the sun moving into Aries, you also have the intuition about what needs to be done next. And if you make statements, pronouncements, give orders, then I think you will be effective. I mean, giving orders might sound like something quite egotistical, but it may not be egotistical. It might be that you are a reluctant leader. You don't really want to be the one to make things happen, let other people do it. You don't want to bark orders. And the more reluctant you feel, the more it is the case that it is a matter of obligation. Now, it's possible, I suppose, Cancer, that you are completely egotistical. You enjoy the sound of your voice. You like pushing people around. I'm not saying it is the case, but if that was to be the case, well, then it would be a different matter. But I just think probably you don't really want to be the one who is taking the lead. But today you might have to, or you might feel you have to. Okay, you don't have to do anything. That's true. But if you could, that would really be helpful. And also, we've got the moon moving into Sagittarius, and with the moon moving into Sagittarius, that's a kind of a mixed message. Moon moving into Sagittarius does make you more dynamic because the moon is moving into a fire sign, but at the same time it gives you a clearer picture of how things need to be done. And that feeds into what I was saying about organization, making sure that everything is shipshape, and having a clear picture of how things should be done, and being able to transmit that by being clear with people and not being afraid to maybe tell someone that one action is better than another, or indeed that something needs to be done. You don't have to do everything on your own. And if you need help, Moon is making trines to Venus and Mercury. If you need help, if you need something to be organized, something to be cleared up, then don't be afraid to ask. You will sound quite reasonable, and fundamentally you're not someone at the moment who should be turned down or ignored, because your personality is strong, and that's the way it is, like it or not. Leo, Sun is changing signs. Sun is moving out of Pisces and into Aries. So that means that the Sun is moving into its sign of exaltation. So, when the Sun is in Aries, in theory at least, Leos should be strong. And you're helped by the fact that the Moon is moving into Sagittarius. So, so with the Sun in Aries and the Moon in Sagittarius, Leo, then, I would have said that things are looking good, and you have a lot of energy, and you don't have to hold back anymore. You may have had doubts in the recent past. You may have doubts still, but those doubts, in most cases, are not realistic. You've maybe gone too far with them. You've perhaps got used to a certain way of being, and this way of being is no longer of any use to you. So now is the time to change gear and to accept that, in some ways, your moment has arrived. And so Leo, if there's something you want, and there's something you want to do, then I would have said that now is your chance, and make sure that you're able to enjoy yourself, and don't be satisfied with old ways of being. That is some danger. It's easy to fall into that trap, particularly if you're a Leo. I mean, Leo is a fixed sign. Leo doesn't like change. So if you have one state of being, it just might be more comfortable than the next stage. You can see the next stage, but do you want to advance towards it? I think it's a time when you should be advancing, and when I was doing your reading for yesterday, I was going on about the fact that the Sun was conjunct Skeet, and that Skeet is this fixed star connected with accidents and disaster and water damage and so on. The Sun is still conjunct Skeet, that's true. You still have to be a little bit careful, but the Sun is moving away from Skeet, and Skeet is, I think it's still right at the end of Pisces. It hasn't gone into Aries yet. So with the Sun moving into Aries, a lot of that pressure is off, and I don't think you need to be quite so worried, and you can stop thinking about all the bad things that might happen and start thinking about all the good things that might happen with the Sun moving into Aries. And it's a time when you should be exploring, and you should not be completely comfortable with the way things are. And in that sense, you should ask yourself questions. So, don't be complacent. Be a little bit tough with yourself if you find that you're holding back. So some Leos might be holding back. They might think they don't want to move to the next stage. They don't want to advance. And so you might need to give yourself a talking to. You might tell yourself that things really have changed, and that the past is no longer serving you very well. It's just holding you back. So that would be the right approach. And just don't allow passing negativity to hold you back. And also be positive about other people. There may be a certain temptation to look at what people are doing and to be ever so slightly negative about it, to be critical. And I think if you are critical, one reason you might be critical is because you're trying to create an excuse for doing nothing, and you're projecting it, and you want to hold yourself back and you want to hold other people back, and that's the way you might like it at an unconscious level. But you need to resist that. You need to catch yourself before you do it, because it's a time to be thinking about the future and the possibilities of the future, and maybe also to understand that the universe wants you to do something. The sun moving into Aries is a time for many Leos where they can be spiritual, where they can connect with things which are beyond themselves, and they can also connect to their own destiny, your destiny. And your destiny is staring you in the face, and you need to embrace that destiny. And today, the sun moving into Aries, the equinox, it's a good time to start. Virgo, your approach might be somewhat strange. I mean, that the sun is moving into Aries. You can't help that. And you're not comfortable with it. Not really, because sun moving into Aries. Aries is a sign which is very different to Virgo. I mean, Virgo and Aries really have nothing in common, nothing to do with each other. And so your first impulse as the sun moves into Aries is to ask yourself whether this is anything you really want. And you might be quite resistant to change, and you might also feel that what's going on around you, and you can see that the speed is increasing. That it's not you. It doesn't feel natural, and additionally, you might sort of respond in a fairly negative way to it all because of a relationship between Mercury and Saturn. Because what's happening is that as the sun moves into Aries, it moves onto the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. I mean, it's kind of on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint, right now, and you can see that Saturn is approximately 7 degrees short of 0 degrees Aries. Mercury is 7 or 8 degrees short of 0 degrees Aries, because Saturn is at 23 Pisces, Mercury is at 7, 8 Aries. So you have this relationship between Mercury and Saturn, and that's going to encourage you, Virgo, to be quite negative. And you really must make sure that you don't exaggerate. And it may sometimes be a case of, speak for yourself. You have your own view, But is it applicable to anyone else? Probably not. Is it even applicable to you? No, I don't think so. So try as hard as you can to be positive, and also don't mix up what you want and what other people want, and give people the freedom to do things their own way, and try not to judge. There may be a certain temptation to judge here, Virgo, to look at what people are planning and to just be negative just for the sake of it, and that really isn't going to be helpful. So am I being completely negative about today? No. Today needn't be bad, provided you look after yourself and you don't project. And it just might be the case that if you want to be constructive, you don't need anyone else. You can do things in your own way. Your approach is possibly going to be slower and more considered than other people's approach. And you will see things that other people miss. You will see subtleties that other people can't conceive of. But you don't have to inflict your insights onto others. I mean, it might seem the right thing to do, but fundamentally what you would be doing is just trying to demonstrate your supposed superiority. And it's not a time to be talking about superiority. Just you work it out. And it may take you a few days to work it out. And once you've worked it out, and you won't have finished working it out today, then you might be in a better position to make pronouncements and to give advice. And so do hold back. And in terms of your own attitude, regardless of what you're saying, your own attitude matters. And don't feel negative about the world and others. Try to see the other point of view, and do concentrate on yourself, and don't allow yourself to be pressurized. But by the same token, don't pressurize other people. That really is going to be very important. Libra, Aries is your opposite sign, and at the moment there is a huge amount of action in Aries. I mean, the sun is moving into Aries. It's the equinox, and with the sun moving into Aries, it is a time when you possibly need to consider other people and other people's interests, and you don't have to be selfless. That's not what it's about. It's just recognizing other people's influence and other people's power. The sun, when it moves into Aries, is all of a sudden in a really very strong position. The sun is exalted in Aries, and so you have to recognize that when trying to work things out and trying to deal with other people. And that's especially the case if it's feels like a zero-sum situation where either you win or you lose. They win, you lose. You can't ever. It's difficult to conceive of everyone being a winner. So there is a certain competitive nature to today. And additionally, when the sun moves into Aries, that potentially creates problems for Venus. Venus is your ruler, because Venus is suddenly combust. Venus is not just in the same sign as the sun, but Venus is moving towards a conjunction with the sun. Venus is retrograde, sun is going direct. It's like two cars on a collision course. You have to combine the speed. So if I don't know, I'm not very good at physics, but if one car is going at 70 miles an hour and the other car is going at 70 miles an hour, I think their collision speed is 140 miles an hour. Is that right? Something like that. So it's kind of like this with the Sun and Venus. And, Venus is retrograde. And it's in Aries, the sign of its detriment. And it's, and it's combust. So just consider the possibility that you don't hold the cards, and that in many cases people are in a much stronger position than you. And this includes people who you like, your friends and so forth. They just have something that you don't have right now. It's not a situation that is going to last long, but you just do have to realize that it's happening, and over the next few days, Venus is going to get weaker and weaker. And I'm not trying to do you down here. I'm trying to point things out so that you can adopt the right approach. And it's certainly a bad time to be getting involved with any kind of competition, or if you've got a rival and you're wondering whether now might be the time to launch an initiative. I don't know, maybe you're trying to launch a lawsuit. That would be a really bad idea. Or if you happen to be vying with someone for a position in perhaps through competition, it's just likely that the other person will take advantage of you. And so in that kind of position, postponement might be a good idea. So if you've got something important going on, especially where there's other competitors, then don't do it right now. Not over the next few days. So if you have a competitive job interview, try and postpone it for weeks, because I think we need to take this Sun-Venus conjunction seriously. But if you accept the situation, things might not be so bad, and it may be, Libra, that you can actually take advantage of other people's strengths. So if you can't do something, or if you don't feel that you have what it takes, then maybe you can use another person. Someone else may be prepared to help you. Give you what you need. And by and large, Libra, it is just a time to let other people take the strain. Though the moon is making a trine to Venus, and so regardless of what I said, if there's something you need to say, you want to talk about, there's something you want to explain, then I think you will be quite good at it. And you don't have to give away any weakness you might have. And it just may be that through discussion you can reach some kind of agreement. But again, we're not talking about a discussion. If it's a real competitive situation, then any discussion is not going to work in your favor. In that case, discussions should be avoided. But if you're trying to get in contact, you're trying to reach out to someone with that moon trine Venus, I think you can do it effectively. I mean, I'd like to be more positive, Libra, and I'm trying to be positive, but I think you just do need to be aware that right now Venus, your ruler, is under a lot of pressure. Scorpio, the moon is now out of your sign. It's in Sagittarius, and it's making trines to Mercury and Venus, and also the Sun is out of Pisces, moving into Aries. So there is a change of gear here, and recently I would have said that Scorpios have been quite strongly placed. And, you had that Moon-Mars mutual reception, you had the Moon-Mars in trine quite recently, but some of that strength is starting to subside. So maybe, Scorpio, you're not going to be able to achieve what you were able to achieve, say, yesterday or the day before. And it might be necessary to slow down a bit, or also just to consider what else is happening. You know, we do have a lot of planets in fire signs, and I think for most of us, having, you know, the Sun in Aries, Moon in Sagittarius, I think is helpful. For you, at least to begin with, it might be a bit overwhelming. It's not really what you wanted. It's just it's just a little bit too much, and you might prefer to steer clear of it all. Though the Moon, you know, making that trine to Mercury, trine to Venus, that could actually be quite helpful in a financial sense. I mean, if there's something you want financially, or if you're trying to organize something and there's a material or financial dimension, you know, you'll be quite good at it, and you'll be quite focused, and you'll know what to do, and you'll know what to ask for. And so when it comes to the realm of finance, I think that Scorpio, you're going to be on your best form, and that may be your area, your spot where you can be effective. And so, Scorpio, you might have just intuitions about the way things are going financially. And you might not have seen them before, and other people might not have seen them, but you can see it. It's obvious. You look at the figures, it all comes together, and it's absolutely clear. And it may be that to be a good accountant, you need a little bit of Scorpio is into getting into things deeply, but a fire provides the intuition. You know, it can take a long time sorting through accounts, seeing accounts, and if you just do it in a very rote kind of way, you might not get to the heart of the matter. But fire allows you to make that connection, the connection between numbers. You see the numbers that don't add up. So if you want to look at accounts, you want to look at numbers, you want to consider your own or even other people's money, I don't think that would be a bad idea. But do things that you want to do, and if it can be about money and organisation, so much the better. If it's something socially orientated, I just don't think it's going to work. I just don't think that you'll be in the mood. So it's possibly not going to be a great day, but if you're able to concentrate on the things that matter, if you're able to concentrate on money, accounts, finance, organisation, then things should be fine. In fact, you might have some important realizations. Sagittarius, things seem to be looking up. The moon is absolutely, definitely in Sagittarius, wherever you are. Okay, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, then this morning the moon might be in Scorpio, but by lunchtime it will certainly be in Sagittarius. So moon moving into your sign, moon indeed in your sign, is going to give you the dynamic impulse you've been looking for, that you might have felt was lacking over the last few days, but now it's there, and you feel that you're someone who absolutely can make things happen. And additionally, there's just something about you that's exciting. You know, where does the action come from? Maybe it comes from you, and a lot of people are going to appreciate that. So, don't be shy, and that sort of extroverted side to Sagittarius, it might be a side that's somewhat unsubtle, it can be a little bit blunt, but that side to your personality can start to come out into the open now, and you don't have to apologize. And if someone is shocked by what you do, I mean, not massively shocked, but if you can give people a surprise, so much the better. Things need to change. And with the sun moving into Aries, and it will stay in Aries for the next month until it moves into Taurus. With the sun moving into Aries, it should be, or can be, a time of year when you are particularly productive, when you can do things which really showcase who you are. And with the moon in Sagittarius, sun in Aries, really you can do something special, and it can be dramatic, and it can also be exciting. And don't feel that anything can hold you back. And if things are a little bit slow over the day, then you don't have to be satisfied with that situation, because right now, Sagittarius, you're able to make things happen. You're able to create sort of metaphorical explosions, and you get people's attention. And if you're in a situation that seems a bit flat, nothing's going on, you have the ability to completely transform it. It just happens. You just turn it upside down, and everyone knows it's changed, and you have created that change. So that might give you a certain amount of responsibility to create the world as you see it, as you'd like it to be. And also, Moon in Sagittarius is making a trine to Venus and a trine to Mercury, and that trine can, from a social perspective, can be extremely useful. People are just going to like you. And as far as relationships are concerned, Moon trine Mercury is a very nice aspect, particularly as it's Moon in Sagittarius trine Mercury in Aries. It allows you and another person to get on very well, to appreciate each other's ability, and you can really foster another person's creativity in the same way that they can foster your creativity. So everything is mutually beneficial. So overall, Sagittarius, it looks like being a fantastic day. Capricorn, it always matters when the sun moves into a cardinal sign, and that's what's happening. Capricorn is a cardinal sign, and the sun is moving into Aries, as it does, obviously, pretty much the same day every year, whether it's the 20th, 21st. That's what happens. And with the sun moving into Aries, things do change a little, and you do appreciate who you are, and you become sort of more stable. I mean, Capricorns are always pretty stable, but I think that with the sun moving into Aries, you become even more stable, or even more concentrated on who you are, what you want to be, and you're not going to do things other people's way. That's just not the way you're going to work. And it's possible, Capricorn, that you might be becoming quite stubborn right now, and you're not going to get caught up in other people's excitement. There is a lot of excitement around at the moment, but I don't think that you're necessarily going to want to be part of it. And you might even want to comment on it, because Mercury is making an interesting relationship to Saturn, and that matters to you. You see, Mercury is at around 7 or 8 degrees Aries, and Saturn is at around 20 to 23 degrees Pisces. So the Aries point is exactly on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. So that means that if you reflect Mercury and Saturn across the Aries point, they reflect onto each other. Now, that does allow you to communicate very, very powerfully. not necessarily in an exciting way or a dramatic way, but your words carry weight. And it's possible, Capricorn, that you may find yourself acting as a brake. There is a lot happening today. A lot of people are excited. They want to do things. They're aware of new possibilities. But you're not caught up in it all. And you're capable of asking questions. For example, is this wise? Is this really the right thing to be done, to be doing right now? And you could be a real pain if you wanted to be. I mean, you could really hold people back. You could stop things happening, and that might not be appreciated. On the other hand, you could be very helpful. You could be the person who sees what might go wrong. And you understand that things aren't as good as they look. And sometimes people need that reminder. And you therefore need to be very careful with what you say, because your words at the moment do carry a lot of power. And through what you say, you can create action. Or you can create inaction. Yeah, you can stop things happening. So that does make you powerful. Your power is not obvious, but it's there. And it may not just be your words, it might be your thoughts. And so, Capricorn, we need to have you around. I mean, you can stop disasters happening, but it's not the kind of power you just want to use for the sake of it. Just because you don't like something. Yeah, sure, you can stop it, but do you want to stop it? So that does put you in a position of responsibility, and you don't want to intervene unless you really have to. But still, I do think that this Sun moving into Aries, is an important time for you, and with the Aries season, regardless of what other people are doing, it is a time over the next month that you can really sort yourself out, give yourself security, and be very dynamic about it. Make it clear, for example, to your family that enough is enough. This has to stop. We now have to be moving in this direction. We need to be doing this and that, and there's no time to waste. So in a family setting, in a domestic setting, I think, Capricorn, you're going to be in complete control. Aquarius, we have the Sun moving into Aries. It's the equinox, and with the Sun moving into Aries, this possibly makes you more communicative than usual. There are things you're able to say, discuss, and you won't have any difficulty being open about your true feelings, and you don't have to be dramatic about it. It's all very clear and it's upfront. And today, Aquarius, you can actually be very honest. And if you don't like something, you'll say it. Your verbal skills are not just crazy and random. They're actually very precise. And one reason for that, as I was just telling Capricorn, because you and Capricorn share the same ruling planet, is that the Aries point is on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. So that means that you can reflect Mercury and Saturn onto each other across the Aries point. And as a result of that, you're going to be able to be very clear. And if there's a message you want to deliver, you will be able to deliver that message with really complete precision. And will people appreciate it? Well, if they don't appreciate it, that's their problem, not yours. honesty is perhaps always a virtue. Though, in terms of your social life, the moon is in Sagittarius. It is making a trine to Venus. It's making a trine to Mercury. So I think that your connections with other people are going to be quite good. I think that you and friends can meet up. So if you want to have a sociable day, then I think that is absolutely possible, and there is going to be something about you that's quite exciting. Though there may be limits to that excitement, because you're always thinking. I mean, Aquarius is always thinking, but you're thinking perhaps more than usual. You are having deep thoughts, and sometimes you may just feel, well, this is going too far. Is this really realistic? And your honesty could be a little bit of a downer sometimes, almost throwing a bucket of cold water at things. But if that's the way you feel, that's the way you feel. I don't think that you should feel especially guilty about it. You know, if the truth is the truth, I mean, it can't really be compromised, can it? Oh, and one thing, the sun is moving into Aries, and the sun does represent potentially another person, because the sun rules your opposite sign of Leo. And so with the sun moving into Aries, remember Aries is a sign of the sun's exaltation. With the sun moving into Aries, that does mean that certain people are going to start to become stronger than usual, stronger than they have been. And this might say something about relationships. So don't underestimate partners, other people close to you. They may have recently been a bit indecisive. They may have been unclear about what they wanted. But with the sun moving into Aries, there might be a sudden change. It is a change for the better, but you have to be aware of it, because you might find that your old assumptions about certain other people no longer hold true. Pisces. The Pisces season is coming to an end, or so it seems. The sun is now out of Pisces into Aries. We've now got Sun, Venus, Mercury in Aries, and so you might feel that something is over. But in a way, it's not quite over, because Venus and Mercury are moving retrograde, and both Venus and Mercury do in the end go back into Pisces, so it's not quite over. You might have another chance, although of course the sun doesn't go retrograde, so the sun won't go back into Pisces until next year, until end of February of next year. But still, things are changing, and you may not have quite as much power as you had recently. You may feel that you're not really the centre of attention so much, and you might be tempted to scale back on things. But you don't want to scale back on things too much, especially today, because the moon is moving into Sagittarius. I mean, the moon is in Sagittarius. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon might not move into Sagittarius until the late morning, but generally speaking, we can regard the moon as being in Sagittarius, and the moon in Sagittarius is making trines to Mercury and Venus, and that moon in Sagittarius is going to allow you to be actually quite prominent. You can assert yourself. You can demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. And the moon in Sagittarius, I mean, it sounds fun, moon in Sagittarius. Sagittarius has a reputation for being sort of open-minded. We think of lots of variety, moving from place to place. But in your chart with the moon in Sagittarius, it's more serious. It's about thinking about what you need to do, what you would like to be doing. And you just have this inspiration that you should be doing something right now. And if you're not doing it, you're going to want to create the change. And it might actually be quite materialistic. It could be about your success, your reputation, your ambitions. It may even have a financial dimension to it. And so you want to look after yourself, and you want to progress, and you're going to want to take yourself seriously. But at the same time, you're not going to be closed-minded about it. You're just going to be looking out for new possibilities. And if you see a possibility, you're going to want to take action. And if you find that things are not moving fast enough, then I think that you're able to create change. You can do something that is really quite dramatic and is unexpected. And that might be about the best way to assert yourself. You can be really very assertive at the moment, and sometimes the best way to be assertive is to be a little bit shocking. So if anyone has taken you for granted, is assuming that you're not going to do anything, that you don't care, that maybe you can be sidelined, well, you can bring yourself back into focus very, very quickly. And straight away, people will take notice of you. So if you ever feel today that things aren't going your way, that you're not being taken seriously, then that's a situation that needn't happen. It needn't be the case. You can create rapid change. And also with the moon making that trine to Mercury and Venus, you have the opportunity to be quite exciting and interesting and compelling. And I think Pisces, in most cases, people are going to listen to you. And if you tell them what to do, if you tell them what's important, then I think they'll understand that you know what you're talking about. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 10, which is treading. Treading is about advancing, but we do have to be careful. Remember, treading is about tigers. When we see treading, it tells us there's a tiger in the room, and it's this tiger. Seems to be a sleeping tiger, appears to be sleeping, but if you've got a sleeping tiger, you've got to be careful, because if you're not careful, you could tread on a tiger's tail, and if you tread on a tiger's tail, it might bite you. And at the same time, the tiger, while it has the potential to cause massive damage, is not necessarily going to take action. It's quite a tolerant tiger. It will give you a certain amount of leeway, well, unless you're really stupid, in which case it might well eat you. But so I always have this image with the tiger as you walk out of a room, you move from one room to another. Maybe it's at the top of the stairs, and you just suddenly see this tiger is just sitting there still, and you just have to as you move from one room to another, you just have to just watch where you put your feet. And so we have two moving lines here, and we have the second line moving and the fifth line moving, and the second line is quite delicate. And we are delicate. We understand that this is a situation that is relatively new. The second line is at the bottom of the hexagram. It represents an early stage. And it may also say something about our experience. We may not be fully connected with what we're trying to do, and we want to take it slowly, and that is absolutely the right approach. And then we move to the fifth line, and the fifth line, normally in the I Ching, the fifth line is quite a good line. It's often the best line in the hexagram, but this fifth line is somewhat problematic because it's saying that we have to be very, very careful. And one translation suggests that maybe our shoes aren't in very good form because this is treading, and obviously may not be literally the shoes. It could be our shoes. It may say something about holes in one's shoes, but it's perhaps saying our shoes are maybe a bit worn out because of a long journey, or they've been damaged, even damaged because a tiger has been gnawing at our shoes. And so the whole way in which we tread could be a problem, and we have to be very aware of it. It's not that we are going to get bitten, but we have to be so careful, and we have to be totally aware of the dangers. So ask yourself, what are you trying to negotiate? It just seems that whatever you're trying to negotiate does require a lot of caution, and there is scope here to make some serious mistakes. And then this hexagram treading, it does switch. It switches to hexagram 21, which is biting through. And biting through is a hexagram related to punishment. And we've had this hexagram quite recently, and something isn't right. Someone is doing something wrong, and it's possible that we have to bring them to task. We have to perhaps go back to this obstacle, whatever we were trying to deal with, represented by the tiger. Our own actions, our own steps, or maybe it was someone else's steps, weren't good enough. They weren't careful enough, and we have to make sure that someone understands. Of course, it may be ourselves, biting through, because biting through, there is a sense of reformation here with biting through. It's about biting through to the gold. So just because someone has made mistakes, just because we have made mistakes, doesn't mean that we're fundamentally wrong. It's just that we need to reform. We need to be perhaps being a little bit stubborn. Perhaps we've been showing a bit of oppositional defiant disorder, maybe. I mean that in a symbolic sense. I don't mean that literally. And so you've got to get through that hard leather covering to get through to the gold, and once you can do that, then you'll have the situation resolved. And now I don't actually want to look at the equinox straight away. I just want to very quickly remind us that it is the 30th anniversary of the sarin nerve gas attack in Tokyo. And so 30 years ago, May the 20th, 1995, I don't know if you remember that, if you were alive at that time. I certainly remember it. And there was a sect in Japan called the Om Shinrikyo, I think something like that. And they had their leader, and he thought it would be a good idea to launch a nerve gas attack on the Tokyo metro. And some very intelligent people were involved in his cult. And so they created nerve gas, this sarin nerve gas, and they went onto the Tokyo metro and they placed it in certain places, and people were killed. And so it was a major event. You think of sarin as a weapon of mass destruction, nerve gas. You don't normally think that it's something that ordinary individuals would be able to concoct. I think maybe Saddam Hussein could come up with sarin, but just some group of individuals in Japan, well, yes, they did come up with sarin. And so on the morning of the 20th of March, there was a sarin attack, and just here's the horoscope of this. Moon's in Scorpio, kind of not surprising. Moon in early Scorpio, conjunct the North Node. So normally you'd associate the North Node as being sort of quite positive, but in this case, maybe we should just regard Moon North Node as being somewhat difficult, especially as the moon is in its as the moon is fallen in Scorpio. And additionally, this attack started at 7 in the morning, but over the next couple of hours, the nerve gas was released. I think that the people, they had pointed umbrellas and they stuck it in bags of nerve gas. And so Neptune was in the 10th house. And so as the midheaven approached the conjunction of Neptune, then, that's when the nerve gas was released. So at 7 o'clock itself, Neptune was exactly on the ascendant. I mean, Wikipedia gives it 7 o'clock as a possible time for this attack. Now, as far as midpoints are concerned, you would think logically, this is death by poison, death by gas, and you'd think logically that would be Neptune aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. In fact, it wasn't Neptune aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It was Pluto was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So you can see there's Pluto. Pluto had just gone into Sagittarius. So Pluto in Sagittarius, that was the beginning of that whole time of the internet generation. The internet became a real thing as Pluto went into Sagittarius. Ordinary people got involved with the internet, and you had connectedness. There's something about Pluto and Sagittarius. You've got a transport system attacked with nerve gas. Pluto on the Mars-Saturn. Mars-Saturn is a death aspect, is a death axis potentially. In this case, it really was. And Pluto could be something very dramatic, very frightening, very small. I mean, low doses of nerve gas could cause a lot of damage. Although a lot of people were killed in this attack, it wasn't the catastrophe that some people think with nerve gas, that nerve gas is going to knock out a whole city or anything like that. It's not always that dramatic, although earlier Saddam Hussein had used nerve gas against, I think it was the city of Fallujah in Iraq, and that caused, I think, thousands of people to die. So I just thought I'd mention the fact that it was the 30th anniversary of the nerve gas attack in Japan on March 20th, 1995. And now I want to look at the equinox. So here is a chart of the spring equinox. I know that if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's not really the spring equinox, it's more the autumnal equinox, but there is a certain hemisphere bias, which I don't think we can avoid. So I will continue to describe it as the spring equinox. And so the equinox is of great spiritual and occult importance. People have ceremonies on the equinox. They have equinox, they have rituals on the equinox. It's in the same way they have rituals at the time of the solstice. Remember the Druids and Stonehenge, the solstice. But if you're having these kind of rituals at the time of the equinox, you do have to be precise. There is absolutely no point in having a ritual on the equinox if it's not the equinox. It is the first day of spring. I think it's the Iranian New Year as well. So if you're in Iran or you're Iranian, Happy New Year. And so the equinox is a moment. The moment of power is when it happens. I make it 9:01, maybe 10. I put the 10 seconds on. I got 9:01, but I adjusted it slightly so that that's a moment when the sun was at 0 degrees, 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, Aries. So, but it's approximately 9:01. So if you want to have some sort of equinox ritual and you're in the UK, then you'd go for 9:01 a.m. That's the moment. That's when the gateway opens. In Paris or Berlin or Rome, it would be an hour earlier, an hour later. It would be at 10:01. And if you're in the Americas, well, it's tough, isn't it? You're going to have to get up early. That means you have to get up at 5:01 a.m. New York is when it happens. If you decide that you're going to celebrate the equinox at dawn when you wake up at 7, too bad you've missed it. And if you're in California, it's at 2:01 a.m. You're going to have to get up even earlier or just not go to bed. So do consider all this if you happen to want to mark the precise moment of the equinox. And if you're in Sydney, Australia, I make it at 22:01. 22:01. So, in other words, 1 minute past 10 in the evening. So that's fairly easy. So do check it. Do set up a chart for 10:01 a.m. Make sure that the sun is at 0 degrees, 0 minutes Aries. And if you're in New Zealand, then it's, I think, again, check it. I make it 1 minute past midnight tomorrow. So just into tomorrow. So the equinox is a precise moment. And at that precise moment, the whole energy of the universe at that time sort of floods in. And theoretically, that might say something about the next 3 months, what we might experience over those next 3 months. And so we can look at the chart of the equinox to maybe give us some idea. We know that at the time of this equinox, the sun is going to be conjunct Neptune. The sun is going to be conjunct Neptune, conjunct Skeet. So there is going to be a strong Sun-Neptune feel to the equinox. It's a time of uncertainty where people are just not going to know what's going to happen, and that's the way it is. Although I'm not convinced that this is an especially dramatic equinox chart. Now, yeah, we have the Sun Neptune, but we've just had Sun conjunct Neptune yesterday, so you could say that the Sun Neptune conjunction is baked into the chart. I mean, let's look at some other midpoints. Let's just see there. If we put this on the 90-degree dial, there's our Sun conjunct Neptune on the top, and so we're trying to see what midpoints there are. One thing we do have is it's on the Mercury Saturn. It's on the Mercury Saturn midpoint, and that is important because Mercury Saturn can be about saying goodbye to something. That's a principle of Mercury and Saturn, and it can also be about travel. I mean, it might seem a bit strange for it to be about travel, but it's about moving from one place to another. So some of us, in terms of how we experience the equinox, particularly if we mark this equinox, it might be a realization that something is coming to an end, and that we have to say goodbye to certain people. And it's also possible that we might decide that we need to move. I mean, not all of us, but we might just be looking at where we're living, and we might be thinking, do we really want to live here? Maybe we should be moving to somewhere else. So that is a possible manifestation of it, but certainly to be thinking about it in terms of something coming to an end, and maybe of relationships coming to an end. I'm not saying any key relationship you're in, a marriage or long-term partnership, but there may be other kinds of relationship which you kind of knew already that it wasn't going anywhere, and the equinox might represent the final moment, and it's Neptune. Neptune on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint might be about the dissolving of ties. Relationships, have just reached a certain point, and what is the point? Why continue? So, those are probably the main themes. So, if you were to mark the equinox in a ritual sense, if you were to do that, I'm not saying you should, you perhaps need to consider what you're bringing in. You might be bringing in the full energy of that Sun on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint, Neptune on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. So you might find that there is a danger there, because if that's not what you want, something could come to an end. That's what you're channeling, because you don't know what you're channeling, do you, unless you thought about it. So ritual magic at the time of the equinox, you've got to be aware of what you're bringing down, and if you want to end something, if you've had enough and you want someone to leave you alone, or you want to move somewhere else and you want to intensify that power, then you might want to celebrate or tune into that moment when the Sun is exactly at 0 degrees Aries. And of course, when the reason that moment is so powerful is because that is the moment when the Sun crosses the celestial equator, or when the hours of day and night are equal. It is a moment of really, really quite intense power. And as far as places on Earth are concerned, this chart was set for London, and I always start with London, and Jupiter's rising, and the question is, what does that mean? Now, you might say that's quite a good thing for Britain, but the question is, how do you read Jupiter? Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter is just rising. You could say that Jupiter's quite strong, because Jupiter is it's a diurnal planet, it's a daytime planet, it's in a masculine sign, it's above the horizon, it's just above the horizon. I'm pretty sure it's above the horizon. You can't always tell exactly whether a planet is. You can't tell exactly whether a planet is above the horizon always just by looking at the chart. But I think there's a feature on this program that says, so Jupiter, according to this, Jupiter rises at 8. According to this, in London, Jupiter rises at 8:56:47. So Jupiter is indeed 8:56, and this is at 9:01. So Jupiter's been above the horizon for about 5 minutes. And so Jupiter's, in one sense, quite strong there. And it may talk about the government in Britain having this sort of blast of optimism, feeling about all the stuff it can do, maybe exceeding itself. And I hope that doesn't say anything about its military expansion. But it's not necessarily so bad for the UK that Jupiter in Gemini, because I think it is quite a strong Jupiter. I mean, it's short term, and these equinox charts is a hit and miss. But if I had to read this, I would have said that the government is trying to get itself together, and this might talk about its expansionist policies. Maybe it will be able to hold the line. That is possible, just for the next few months. I mean, I do think that Britain is in absolutely serious trouble. Starmer is in trouble. I think that Neptune going into Aries, which Neptune is about to go into Aries, is going to be a real disaster for the Starmer regime. But it just may be that this equinox isn't quite so bad for the government. So that's one view. And another place to look at is Moscow. Now, I would kind of say the reverse with Moscow. Now, as you know, if you've been watching these videos, I really do believe that Russia is on the up. I think that in the end Russia will win this war. And I've thought this before the war started. I on my blog around 2020 I looked at the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I thought this was very much Russia's 20 years. Still, this is a difficult time if you believe these these equinox charts, because set for Moscow, you have Mars on the ascendant and you have Saturn on the midheaven, and sort of having Mars and Saturn are quite difficult aspects. Difficult planets. Saturn is a greater malefic, Mars is a lesser malefic. Saturn on the midheaven, Mars on the ascendant. You also have the Mars-Saturn midpoint is going to be on the ascendant midheaven midpoint, and so this might be suggestive of difficulties in Russia, maybe higher casualties, but it may just be about the will to get this thing done, and just had enough of this war. Let's just do it, and maybe in the process a lot of people could get killed. I mean, that's one way in which the Mars and Saturn like this could work. It doesn't necessarily mean that Russia is going to have major reverses in the war. It may be about something about the way they decide to conduct the war, an approach that perhaps has higher casualties, but there is that end in mind, that they've got to finish this war regardless. And then, of course, don't forget, look at the equinox chart for London with that Jupiter rising. This is a country that is going to do everything to stir things up. So that Jupiter rising on the London chart, it could actually be quite dangerous, and something that you really need to think about. And I should look at the equinox set for Washington, D.C. The Washington, D.C. equinox is not especially spectacular. Well, it's not as spectacular. If you set the equinox for Washington, you've got Pluto on the Pluto rising, sort of, not exactly rising. You've got Uranus. You've got Uranus on the IC, so that means that the Uranus ascendant midpoint is going to be conjunct the Pluto midheaven midpoint. So that might be important. The fact that Pluto is around 4 degrees from the ascendant, Uranus is around 4 degrees from the IC, and so I think in terms of American politics, there are things going on, and it's not as simple as anyone is thinking. Certainly not as simple as Trump is claiming. It is going to be a long process, and there's going to be further turmoil, and you might say that there's going to be a real determination to get things done, to make things happen, regardless of the cost. So that could be a little bit difficult. But looking at this equinox overall, regardless of what I said about those 3 capitals, Washington, London, and Moscow, I don't think that this is an especially dramatic equinox. Now, that doesn't mean to say that dramatic things won't happen over the next few months, but there are going to be other reasons why we could expect drama. For example, Neptune moving into Aries and Saturn moving into Aries. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say about the equinox. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.